Hi everyone. In this week's module, we're going to touch on the basics of sustainability and then talk about different energy sources. We'll look at sustainability from many different perspectives this semester as we go through different building systems. But let's start out here in this week with a broad overview. What exactly is sustainable design? What does sustainability mean? We'll cover the 4 Rs and talk about ways to choose design priorities with respect to sustainability. In the next video, we'll talk about energy sources, renewable versus non-renewable, and go into more detail about some of the renewable sources. Starting out with a definition, what exactly do we mean when we say sustainable design? There's a lot of them out there, but my favorite is this one from the Brundtland Report by the United Nations. And it says, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. One way to think about sustainable design, or one framework, is called the 4 Rs. Now, you're probably really familiar with the first three because they've been popular since the 70s: reduce, reuse, recycle. Your textbook tags on a fourth one, and that's regenerate. What do these mean in the context of building design? Let's take a closer look. In the reduce category, one of the major, very important sustainable design strategies is to reduce the operating energy required by buildings. We'll talk about that several times over this semester. Also, a major goal is to reduce the embodied energy required to build. In the reuse category, this includes remodeling, renovation, and adaptive reuse of any existing buildings. It also includes the deconstruction and reuse of individual building components rather than the entire building. The recycle category involves a bit more work where we deconstruct a building and then recycle those components. All right, instead of just reusing them in their same form, we recycle them and then reuse them. And on the designer's side, that includes selection of materials with recycled content. Finally, regeneration. What does that mean? It involves strategies that restore, renew, and revitalize any damaged earth. All of these great ideas are good for the earth and good for your building. How do you choose which is best for your project? Well, you need to set your sustainable design priorities. And within this 4 Rs framework, there is an order, all right, a relative importance of each approach. It's more effective, it's better to reduce the total size of your building or reduce the total amount of energy that your building uses. All right, and then going down in the levels of priority, reuse, recycle, regenerate. Another framework or another way to think about sustainable design priorities involves the overall goal of each individual option or each choice. All right. How do we support the most important goals? Which ones are most important? Well, it turns out that there's some variability. You have to set the goals for your own projects. But overall, in general, you can follow this framework, and it's coming from your textbook and also an article called Establishing Priorities with Green Building. The number one, very most important sustainable design priority is going to be to save energy across the board. All right. If you're familiar with the LEED program, some of these goals should sound very familiar to you because they map quite closely with the LEED program goals. So you've thought about what goals you want your project to support. Now, which strategies are the best in order to achieve those goals? It turns out here's yet another way to think about these sustainable design priorities, and it's called scale. And what this means, take a look in your textbook, but what this means is that you want the most bang for your buck, all right? You want the most effect from your strategies. And therefore, you need to consider them in this order. The first one is passive design strategies. These are the most important for your project. They're based on climate and they require no energy, all right, to operate. The next one, the next most important strategies to put into effect are behavioral strategies. These involve your occupants and how they use your building. The next category are renewable technology strategies. This includes on-site energy production, right? Wind, solar, etc. And this category is really important for net zero projects. Finally, the last thing that you should consider, and you definitely need to consider it, but it is last in the list, all right, is active design strategies. This includes efficiency measures for your mechanical systems. If you're thinking, boy, this sounds familiar, you are right. Last week, we took a look at the three-tier approach to sustainable design. On the right, we're talking about prioritization of different sustainable design strategies, and they work together. Different criteria can be combined in order to select the sustainable design priorities for any particular projects. And here's an example. We've talked about some overall sustainable design goals, such as save energy, recycle buildings, etc., and which ones should come first. Remember that these are going to vary depending on your specific project. And we talked about sustainable strategies, kind of large categories of strategies such as passive design, behavioral, renewable, etc. All right, and we can rank those in order too. If you combine those two sets of categories in a matrix here, you can see that some areas are going to be far more important than others. So as a designer, the first thing you're going to need to look at is that important category of strategies that save energy and fit under the passive design. And let me throw one more wrench in your thinking here. Um, Even if you're considering saving energy using passive design, the appropriate strategies are going to be different for every project, in part because of climate. We'll cover this in far more detail next week, but your different climate zone will affect the appropriate strategies for your project. Thanks everyone. In this video, we covered what exactly is sustainable design and then some different frameworks for thinking about and categorizing and setting sustainable design goals.